My name is John Lux, and I'm the Executive Director of Film Florida. Welcome to the first Film Florida Friday. Film Florida Fridays are interactive conversations about current topics, initiatives, and relationship building in Florida's film, television, commercial, photography, and digital media industry. For those that aren't familiar with Film Florida, the organization is a not-for-profit association run by volunteer members of the industry that represent all sectors of the film, television, production, and digital media tech industry throughout Florida. We're funded entirely by our members, and those members include industry professionals and companies, local film commissions, colleges and universities and their students, other associations, unions, tourism entities, and pretty much anybody that supports our industry. Our members come from Pensacola to Key West and everywhere in between, so we truly represent all aspects of the industry throughout the entire state of Florida. Our functions include marketing, professional development and education, networking, and advocating. Before we get going, I want to thank Film Florida President Gail Morgan for allowing us to create Film Florida Fridays. I also want to thank Film Florida members Sandy Leiterman, Christy Andrioni, and M. Denise Simmons for being instrumental in creating this new series. In just a moment, our special guests are going to introduce themselves. Then I'll ask some questions to get things going. During that time, we're going to ask that everybody keep their microphones on mute to avoid background noise. After we've gotten through the initial questions, we're going to open it up to the audience for questions and conversation. At that time, please use the hand raising function so we can call on you. We want this to be more conversational and interactive, but we also don't want 30 people talking at the same time. We're going to ask everybody to keep their questions and comments brief in the interest of time and out of fairness to others that want the opportunity as well. With that, I want to introduce you to our guests. Today, we have Thom Gossom Jr. and Ronald Baez. And rather than you listen to me talk more, I'm going to let our guests introduce themselves. Thom, let's start with you.
My name is Thomas Gossom, Thom Gossom, whichever you choose. Go by them both. I have been, I just added the years up, a professional actor for 38 years. I also own a business called Best Gurl, which is a consulting firm that my wife and I run, which I have also run for 38 years. Had two careers that were parallel. I actually stayed pretty busy. We've been very, very busy during the pandemic, and the shooting has opened up. So in the last month, I shot a film up in North Carolina, and I'm going to shoot a television show next month over in Atlanta. And I'm sorry, none of it's in Florida, but that's where the jobs are.
Yep.
That's pretty much, and actually I'm going to read for a job at 2:00 today. We shoot my auditions right here in my office. So I can tell you more if you want to know more, or I could stop there and then you can ask me questions.
Well, I think we're going to hit some of the other stuff as we get going. So Ronald, take a minute and introduce yourself.
Sure. So my name is Ronald Baez. I was born and raised in Miami. I am a filmmaker and immersive media artist and a public programmer. I work with a collective of filmmakers called the White Elephant Group, and I also am the artistic director of a nonprofit called the After School Film Institute, which helps kind of mentor underserved kids from underserved communities and teach them filmmaking and life skills and so on and so forth. Currently, I have a couple of different things going on. I have 2 projects in post and 2 projects in the festival circuit. And I'm also working with the resident artists at the Art Center for a project called Birds of Paradise that will be premiering in September, I believe. So that should be fun.
Excellent. So Thom, let's start with you. Let's start back in Birmingham, Alabama. Tell us a little bit about your childhood and how you found your way to Auburn.
I'm sorry, John. I was putting my ear things in. I didn't hear you. Can you say
No
that?
problem. Let's start back in Birmingham, Alabama. Let's learn a little bit about your childhood and making your way to Auburn University.
Well, grew up in Birmingham. It was I had a really wonderful childhood as far as I'm concerned. Went to Catholic school for 12 years. I went to church every day for 12 years. So I figure I got enough prayers saved up to get into heaven some kind of way. And I decided I'd go to Auburn University. I wanted to play football. I didn't grow up. I did grow up playing football, but it was in the street and in fields, and didn't play any organized football until I was in the 11th grade. After I graduated high school, I decided I would go to Auburn and walk onto the football team. I did. Earned a scholarship in 10 months and ended up being a 3-year starter. I was drafted by the New England Patriots. It was a time of integration. There were 2 blacks on the football team when I was there. There were 4 when I left. I actually wrote a book about it that's done really well called Walk On. I got a copy of it here somewhere. I should have had one here I could have shown you. But the book is done really well. As a matter of fact, I'm dealing with a guy in Los Angeles right now about possibly doing a movie of it. And then I got into this business by pretty much accident. I didn't have time to do any acting when I was playing football. It takes up all your time. And I started doing community theater. I did my first play when I was 30. And I got a call one morning. I did really well doing community theater. You know, you don't get paid, but we did it on a very professional basis. And I got a call one morning after we'd done a show, and it was a casting director. She told me she was the casting director. I said, okay, what's that? And she told me they were putting a movie together in Birmingham, and the director had come to the show the night before and wanted to write a part for me in his film. He did, and I got my SAG card, and I went from there. Got on in the heat of the night. I did 25 episodes of that over the years, and that all that stuff that was shot in Atlanta. And when that show finally folded, things, you know, I never left home. I was in Birmingham the whole time, and it's kind of an unheard of type career. And then I did a film called Miss Evers Boys with Alfre Woodard and Lawrence Fishburne. It was a great, great film. It was wonderful. It probably had the most fun I've had on any shoot. And I got to work with Alfre, who's probably the best actor I've ever worked with. My wife and I went to the premiere in Los Angeles, and you had a question about your break. How'd you get your big break? I think it takes several big breaks to have a 38-year career. And after the show, after the premiere, Miss Evers Boys, we came out. We were in Warner Brothers, I think, and this guy comes up to me and he asked me if I was interested in working out of Los Angeles. And I said, well, you know, Alfre and them had been telling me I should be in Los Angeles. And I said, yeah, you know, and he was with the artist agency at the time. They were a top 5 agency in Los Angeles. And he said, we'd like to represent you. And so the next day I went over and met the agents, and 2 weeks later, I started commuting back and forth to Los Angeles out of Birmingham, and continued to do that. And we moved to Florida. My wife went to school over at the University of West Florida to get her doctorate. And so that's sort of how I did that. It took off for me when I got to Los Angeles. I did an episode of NYPD Blue. We won an Emmy for it. I was the lead character in it. And so things just kind of took off from there. And so I moved out of Los Angeles in 2010, and I took a couple of years off, reestablished my business. I've been working out of Atlanta since then. The lady who worked as the receptionist for my first agent owns the agency now, and So she's my agent again. So it's just all kind of worked out.
Excellent. Excellent. Ronald, how about you? Give us a little bit of background on where you came from and how you've gotten to your place.
So I was born and raised in Miami. I only briefly left to go to college in Boston, and then lived in Boston and a little bit in New York for a small amount of time, and then came back to Miami. I about 10 years ago I had a bunch of friends who were all making movies, and I originally was a musician. But that didn't work out, and I was like, well, I'm not sure what to do. And I had a bunch of friends who were filmmakers, so I was like, oh, I'll give this a shot. 10 years later, I still do it for a living, which is nice. But like, really, growing up in Miami was amazing. I still think it's an extraordinarily unique place. And I don't think I'm a relatively young artist. I'm 32 years old. So I haven't had, I think, what you'd call a big break. I have a lot to learn from someone like Thomas, who has like a huge career, which I'm really excited to hear more about. But I have had some luck, especially with community building and building our collective, and our projects have done well in the festival circuit, and we've won some really prestigious grants for our work. So we're kind of on the up and up, myself and the people that I work with over at the White Elephant Group. So it's been very community oriented, what we've been able to do, and I think that I pretty much owe everything to the people in my community.
Well, Ronald,
some of the people on this call, frankly.
Well, let's stick here. Tell us a little bit more about the White Elephant Group.
Sure. So the White Elephant Group is a film and media collective, and it actually consists of a group of artists who are all young minorities. So it's a completely minority-driven collective. It has something like a 60-40 female-led crew. So most of our crew is actually female, which is awesome.
And we
keep we keep like a really, really strong sense of minority driven content. We tend to focus on stories in communities that are typically either underserved or underrepresented. So we make a lot of LGBT stories. We make a lot of stories about the Black experience, the Latino experience, the Caribbean experience, things like this. And really the goal is to try and give voice to underrepresented voices, and to try and allow minority content to be made by mid-level career artists. So one in the collective is 45, young, own little thing that we give each other work through, and we are able to create work through it. And it also kind of feeds into the work that we're doing with the After School Film Institute, which allows us to continue kind of career building, and also building the careers of emerging artists and young artists who are like in their late teens, going to college, maybe coming out of college, so on and so forth.
Excellent, excellent. And Thom,
very community oriented kind of group.
Yeah. So Thom, I want to go back over to you and talk a little bit, in addition to all the acting stuff, your company is called Best Gurl Inc., which you mentioned. Tell us a little bit about the company.
Best Gurl is a consulting business. Best Gurl, first of all, is named for my wife. She is the best girl. And we have been, I started the business in 1987 as Thom Gossom Communications. I worked 10 years for Bell South AT&T and worked in management. I ended up on the staff of the president. I used to write his speeches, and I was his advance guy and did all that stuff. And I also handled the invoices for all the consultants that came through. And I saw how much money the consultants were making. So it's like, okay, I want to be a consultant. And I talked them into letting me leave the company and then become a consultant back to the company. And so I worked for them as an employee for 10 years, and then I worked for them as a consultant for the next 13 years. But I wanted to be a consultant, not just for the money, but I had started doing the acting, and it was, they were sort of colliding. And how can I do them both? Well, if I could go on my own, then I could pretty much do them both. And So now we do a lot of consultation with higher ed, Auburn University, University of Alabama, Birmingham, University of Arkansas. We did a lot of work for an organization called NAPCA, the National Association of Branch Campus Administration. We do assessment, we do diversity, we do leadership, we do a lot of things like that. It's an interesting business. One of our employees is actually in South Florida. She lives in Boca. I've never met her personally. She's been working for us for the last 3 months, but I know her by Zoom. And we have 3 more employees, one in Birmingham and one in Auburn. They're near the clients. So it's been going well. It's amazing that the pandemic has increased the business, and we learned early on how to do events and things like that by Zoom. And so a lot of our clients hire us to coordinate and do their events. It's a fun business, and we do that along with there's another side to it, and then there's the consulting, the education side, and then there's the communications side of it, film and television side. I do a show called Tuesdays with Thom that we started doing in September, and we've now done 31 shows. And my guest next week is a guy named Stefan Deming, who I've worked with for about 30 of my years, and he does hairstyling. He's a stylist in the business in film and television. So we've worked on 4 or 5 projects together. So it's but that's our business. It's a fun business. My wife really heads up the education side of it, and I do more of the communication side of it.
So I want to jump ahead a little bit to make sure that we have time for our audience here. And so, Ronald, diversity is such an important initiative in our industry today, and you had touched on it already. What's your mindset when you go into a project? Actually, sorry, I lost my spot. In your words, why is it so important for our industry to be a leader in that movement for equality and diversity and inclusion?
Right. So my mindset going into a project has more to do with authenticity than to do with kind of like intentionally creating diversity, because our jump off point is so inherently diverse that it like we already kind of have that it's baked into what we do. But it really is trying to find authenticity inside of the work that we're doing. And the reason for that is we feel like audiences gravitate towards authenticity. It feels more human, more the stories feel more palatable. But in the larger sense and the need for inclusion and diversity, I think a lot of that has to do not only with the fact that there is incredible complexity in the humanity of people who tend to be underrepresented, not only their experiences, but also their stories as a whole, but also they exist and they are part of the audience. They're part of the tapestry that makes our country an amazing thing, and there's someone else's. And so if I look at it,
so Ronald, we seem to have a little bit of a choppy connection there with you. So I'm going to jump over to Thom. And Thom, let me ask you, from your perspective, why is it so important that our industry be leaders in that diversity and inclusion message?
Well, because we are the ones that people go to daily, whether it's film, television, streaming, whatever, radio, what have you. And that's where a lot of people get their ideas and images as to who people are in the world. Growing up, there were very, very few Black people on television. The only black people in the newspapers were people who had been arrested. And so that was the image that was created. Then when they started using black people, then they were very stereotypical. And so I think now there is an effort to, and I really noticed it because I used to do a lot of commercials when I was in Los Angeles. And I remember going on a commercial audition, and they were pairing us up with like teenage girls to be our daughter. And this is a few years ago. And they paired up, and they would, they just randomly select you to go in for the audition. That didn't mean you were necessarily going to do it with this person. And they called this guy I know, and if I can't think of his name, but he was on some show. He liked himself a lot. All actors like themselves. And he refused to go in with the young lady, white girl, because he said, I ain't going in there with that white girl, and they ain't gonna choose me with a white girl. And he hurt the young lady. She started crying and stuff, and I ended up going in with her. But point is, now there is all kinds of families represented on television. You see families represented in all different kinds of ways, whether that be ethnicity, whether that be gender, or what have you, which is probably the way of the world. And I think you can do a lot more visually rather than trying to preach and convince somebody and talk somebody into something that they don't believe. And so I think, for me, we have a responsibility. When I went to Los Angeles, I'd already had a life. And so there were certain things I was not going to do. And I don't do things with guns unless I can help it. I played a sheriff in this last film, but I never had to pull the gun out. I don't do things that would be a bad example for children if I can control it.
And what's your recommendation to grow the number of roles? I mean, I know there's only so much you can do as the actor, but is there anything that you see the industry can do more of to make sure there are better roles for?
You got to have diversity in the decision making. You got to have people who are making the decisions who, we still, this audition right here, I just got, this is the only business where they can tell you they want a black person in this role. Generally, that's against the law. So you can't, the people making the decisions can control the diversity of a situation. And then you have to have more people in decision-making responsibilities. It's one of the reasons I always liked working for myself, because, I could make decisions. And so I think that's where it starts, and pretty much that's where it ends, because you can get, you can bring people into jobs that they would have a hard time getting into themselves. It's a very, the thing I think that helped me more than anything is when I got into it, I was a little bit older, and I understood right away that it was a business. I wasn't excited just because I was on television. It was, okay, how can I maximize this? And I'll just say this quickly and then move on. But after I'd been on In the Heat of the Night for a few years, I started getting these statements every year that said, if you do this, if you keep working here, whatever, you'll get a pension one day. And it was like, oh man, I can get a pension doing this. And so anyway, I've changed the subject. So.
Well, actually, I agree with Thomas when he talks about like putting people in decision-making roles. I think that one of the things that's frustrating for a lot of artists who are minorities is you'll have diversity initiatives that often try and place you in the below the line. And you're like, okay, well, I'd really like to produce, I'd really like to direct, I'd really like to write. And it's frustrating when you have people go, hey, we're going to do this thing and everyone's going to sign on and it's going to be great. And Hollywood's going to open up to a bunch of Black and Hispanic and Asian artists, so you guys can be gaffers. And that's great. It's awesome. But there's more than just below the line. And the decision-making aspect of what's happening, who's doing most of the hiring. It's frustrating when you see yourself not in that space and you don't have the access to that kind of mentoring. You don't have the access to that kind of industry. You have to build whatever you have from the ground up because you weren't born into anything. And so that, I think, is very frustrating for a lot of the artists that I work with, because though a lot of the artists that I work with are gaffers, some of them are producers. And some of them want to produce. Some of them want to hire Black actors. They want to hire Hispanic actors. They want to hire Asian actors to lead, as opposed to playing some supporting role or playing the best friend or what have you. And so I think that diversity initiatives often make that mistake of thinking, instead of thinking, let's give money and support to artists of color and producers of color, they think, let's give them an opportunity to work inside of our already faltering system. And I think that's an issue from my perspective, at least.
Can I just say one more thing about
Please.
that, John? I was on a call yesterday, and right now in Hollywood, Los Angeles, the hot thing, women, Blacks are what's happening now. And so you'll see a lot of projects with Black people in them, Black themed projects, a lot of projects where women are leading or directing or producing or the executives. And so but it's a copycat business. Somebody does something that does well, and everybody does that. But right now is a good time.
I think it's better. I think it's getting better. I just like when I have that conversation, I always think it's interesting because maybe it's in my youth, being young and being emerging, being like at the beginning of my mid-level career, it's difficult to think that at the end of a marathon you don't look towards the finish line, as opposed to looking back at where you came from. And so when someone says, like in conversation, when one of our friends says something like, well, like things are getting better, I'm like, we're not there yet. And when we get there is when I can look back at where we came from. But at the end of a race, I don't look back, I look forward. Like I'm trying to get to where I'm going. So yeah, I completely agree. There's a lot of opportunities that are jumping off. We're getting a lot of support for all the work that we're doing. We're seeing a lot of our friends get a lot of that kind of support too. And a lot of our community is really bumping with like opportunities. That's really great. I want to see more of it. I want to see the same kind of opportunities that I see with my white brothers and sisters happen with my Black brothers and sisters, with my Haitian brothers and sisters, with my Dominican brothers and sisters. And I think that if they didn't have fascinating stories to tell, I'd understand, but they do. We have these amazing stories.
Yeah, that's very true. And Ronald, as far as the creative process goes, what is your favorite part of the process?
So I thought about that a while, because I was trying to come up with I was thinking in phases, because filmmaking happens in phases, right? In development and pre-production, production. But there's this ideation that happens in every phase. Whether you're on set talking to your DP about redesigning an image system, or whether you're writing this piece of dialogue, you have license to think outside of your budget and outside of your scale, and you just be purely creative. That to me is my favorite thing. Like the moment before you become limited by reality and you just get to like live inside of a character, live inside of a story. And each phase of filmmaking has that built into it somehow. But I love that feeling. And then being surrounded by people who are equally as fascinated with that, to me, is the best.
Tom, how about you? What's your favorite part of the process?
Writing.
Okay.
I enjoy the writing process, and I've written 4 books. I wrote the documentary that I did called Quiet Courage, and I'm finishing up another book called The Fire Hose. I just enjoy creating characters. I enjoy that whole process. I've been working on this book for a while, and the characters won't let me finish because they keep wanting to do new things and expand and grow. And so I really enjoy the writing process. I enjoy acting as well, and I enjoy film and television acting because it's so technical and it's so minimal, and that's really fun for me to do something that and the best person I've ever seen do this is Alfre Woodard, but I don't know if you guys seen the film Clemency that's out now with Alfre, and Alfre can do so much with no dialogue, and that's just a beautiful thing to watch. And so I enjoy that part of it. You know, this is really weird. When I do something, I'll watch myself one time, but I never watch it again because the fun is doing it.
Yeah.
And you know when you do it, whether you've gotten off or not, whether it's like, oh, excuse my language, oh shit, man, that was good. You know,
Yeah.
and
That excitement. Yeah. You get like, oh man, that was really, can we do it again?
Exactly.
Can we have another one? Yeah.
Exactly. So I enjoy the acting. I love the writing. And so I enjoy the process of it. And I've been lucky. You know, the first job I did was In the Heat of the Night, and the first long-term thing I did, and with Carol O'Connor and Howard Rollins. And I just got to come in at a high level. We were a top 10 TV show for like 5 years, and I got to watch and to learn and from them. And so that was just, I guess, about as lucky as you could get, really.
Yeah. I have a couple more questions, but I'm going to go to the audience here. We'll see if we can get a couple. So Malia, I'm going to ask you to unmute and go ahead and ask your question.
Thanks, John, and thanks, Ronald and Thom, for appearing. It's been really great to hear you all. I'm a professor at FSU in the School of Communication, and so I'm asking not really for myself, but for my students, one of whom is here. I hope he gets a chance to ask his question, Darren. So Ronald, you mentioned kind of some below the line opportunities for emerging BIPOC filmmakers and the limits of that. But I'm wondering if those are all in LA or other places. Do we have those in Florida? I'm not aware of them to tell my students. And it just, you know, I think that what you all brought up about, you know, it has to be that we change not just who's in front of the camera, but who's behind. So how I think, you know, it's the pipeline at every level. It's my job as well. But, you know, how can the industry in Florida create more opportunities that are not unpaid internships that are in Florida? Because I think sometimes it is a barrier for students, you know, just recently graduating to go out to LA where they don't have family to stay with, where they don't have that community. So it's not necessarily a question that I expect Thom or Ronald to be able to answer, but in a group of Film Florida, you know, professionals, like how can we do better and do more?
Ronald, you want to take a stab at that one?
Sure. I think that there's a lot of opportunities to have people originate projects in Florida. I remember maybe 6 years ago going to a Film Florida meeting and talking about the value of low budget projects in building communities. And I sincerely think that building your community is like focusing beyond an individual career and building a community around not only a group of filmmakers, but an entire community of filmmakers that might be statewide, involves not only, you know, having them work as catering and gaffing and gripping and all this other stuff, which is wonderful and awesome opportunities on these really, really, like tier 1 projects, these really, really high-end projects, but also making sure that you're not losing your creativity to brain drain because you're not funding or supporting the funding or financing of native projects, like projects that are native to the state. And so what I've seen a lot of recently is kind of soft money support, grants and so on and so forth, that are helping artists from Florida originate projects in Florida. And there's an obvious kind of like interest in Florida filmmakers that's been kind of coming in. Sandy was actually instrumental in bringing in Slam Dance, which is going to be a huge thing to be able to highlight South Florida filmmakers and all this great stuff. So from my perspective, I think that you first have to build that community. And once you can focus on building that community, that talent that you have that's inherent of that community that you're building will come into the fray and receive the attention that it needs to be able to then bring the financing and so on and so forth. And then people like Film Florida working on the legislative side, making sure that there's incentives for that money to come in and stay here, I think is relevant too. But I guess the kind of indirect answer I have to your question for your students is to be part of a community, to not just build a career, to build something larger than themselves and to be part of building something larger than themselves. And every opportunity I have ever had came from me being part of a community, never me being just this genius that's amazing. Like that's just not who I am. I'm part of a community. I contribute to a community. I work with a community. That's relevant to me. I think that's where a lot of the support that I get comes from.
Thom, anything to add there?
Yeah, I think there are all kinds of small projects you can do, and I shouldn't even use the word small because they're projects. And when, I do some corporate stuff, and you don't need a big crew. You don't actually need an incentive. You just need a small budget and the people to do the work. And, you can be proud of the work that you do. That's the most important thing. What are you doing? And if you put some work out there, the thing, and that's why I like the writing, because with the writing, you can control the budget. And the thing I worked on in North Carolina, it was $100,000 job. And he had, and he did an incredible job, but we didn't have everybody stayed in one location. There were 3 cabins there. There were no trucks and all that stuff. And so he was able to do a quality. We had a very small crew. The guy shooting, the DP, and one grip. And he, it looks good. And he's already got a distribution deal. And so you can do things on a smaller basis. Everybody thinks if you go to Los Angeles that you quote made it. You can make it wherever you are, particularly now. When I left Los Angeles, we moved to Northwest Florida. When I have to do things that are in my business, I use people from around here. The film I shot, Quiet Courage, I shot with a guy, primarily a guy from here. He did most of the shooting. He did all the editing. And so I think you can. For young people, I just tell them, do it. If you think about when I described my career, there's no one way to have a career. You just have to get in the game every day and play. And eventually things will come your way, and you'll find some things. And you can write things. I can write. I had a meeting yesterday, but I can write a script now, and I can control the budget in my head based on the locations, based on what I'm going to need in terms of equipment, based on the number of people I'm going to need, and so on and so forth. So it is possible. And, unless you just want to be on CBS every Tuesday night, you can see yourself in a lot of different roles now, particularly that we've got the Zoomer and everything else that we have now.
That's right. All right,
Thank you. Can I just really quick say thanks?
Sure.
And if anyone else has resources to share that I can share with students that you could put in the chat, I would appreciate that.
absolutely. Thanks, Malia.
Thank
All
you.
right, we're going to, Yvonne, you're up next. I'm going to spotlight you so everybody can see you, and go ahead and ask your question.
Hey, good morning. It's great to be here. Good to see some of the people I haven't in the audience here. I haven't been able to connect in quite a while, so it's good to be here. I wanted to make a comment about the diversity real quick, and then just ask a question. My son is actually at NYU at the Lee Strasberg School, acting school, and he called me, I think it was Friday, and said, "Mom, I'm thinking about having a conversation with my my agent." It was pilot season, and he was sent on a lot of auditions, and there was only one that he wasn't playing. Asked to play a crook, asked to play. And so as we talk about these, and if anybody knows my son, he's the sweetest thing. I mean, just the whole idea. And he's like, "Mom, I can play it. I guess I'm an actor, but like, why does she keep sending me on these roles of playing, and I was thinking about what you were saying, Thomas, earlier, just in terms of, that's what you got when you first went out there. And so although things are changing, and we are, I think with the Black Lives Matter movement, people are understanding the importance of diversity, there's still a lot of these stereotypical roles being, offered to young Black males.
It is. And oftentimes, sometimes I've always been the first Black in Auburn, the first Black do this, first Black. And what comes with that is a responsibility to educate people. He just needs to tell her.
Yeah.
He needs to have a conversation. Now, she may get mad. She may not want to represent him anymore. He'll find somebody else to represent him. Yeah. But you have to make people aware. For her, it's 10%. It's a check. It's a 10% check. And if he doesn't do it, she'll get somebody else to do it. So I think if he doesn't want to do it, then he should probably figure out a way where he doesn't have to do it.
I didn't introduce myself. I run the Women's International Film Festival here in Florida, and I also do an edition in New York. And I think one of the things we talk about a lot is this idea of unconscious bias. I think about that in terms of women. And right. Ron, I was really excited to hear that you said that you have 60% of the people who are behind the scenes with you are women. And I think what you're saying is the same thing. I don't think that there's necessarily an intent, but I think there's this unconscious bias. And for us, it's important because for the little kids coming up, we don't want Black boys to think that all you can do in life is be a crook. We want them to know, right? We want them to know that the whole world is available to do that. And so these sisters and role models are very important.
I've honestly never understood when someone said to me something like, "I can't find women to fill a role." I've never understood that. And I think the biggest, in our experience, we've been working together as a collective and introducing new members to our collective for like the last 5 years. I can't tell you that is true, because that has not been my experience at all. My experience is exactly what you're talking about. I think unconscious bias is possibly the nicest way to say that. And I think, I just being sincere, I'm just like, I don't know that that's the case, because I know this, excuse my language, group of badass women who are grips, who are gaffers, who are ADs, who are producers, who work with us on a daily basis, grabbing Hollywood and combo stands like nobody's business. I never even asked them what they're doing. And I think that when you look at them, you see women. When I look at them, I see grips and gaffers. I don't see anything else. And so from my perspective, when someone says to me something like, "I can't find a female to fill a role," I'm like, nah, you can't find a role that fits your idea of a female. That's different. You know what I mean? Like, that's different. You can find a female to fit a role, man, because a gaffer is a gaffer. A gaffer don't come in no gender. And so that to me is silly. But the representation side, when you gave the story about your son, I have a buddy named Essen Jean. One time we're having a conversation. He's an actor and a filmmaker. We're having a conversation a couple years ago. We're having a conversation about finding roles as a Black actor. And he said something that stuck with me. He said, I have to make things that I believe in. And that's hard to balance because on one side you have a career to build, and on the other side, you know, there's things that you want to do. And the way that he chooses, I guess, I don't know if he's changed his mind, but the way he chooses to balance that out, last time we spoke about it, was essentially to think that the things that he genuinely thinks he'd be good for, regardless of what they are, the things that matter to him are the things that will give him his breaks, the things that they'll prove his opportunities to him. And so from that perspective, he kind of doesn't go for work that he doesn't believe in because he thinks it's a waste of time. And you might see me on some random Tuesday on CBS for a weekend, whatever, like, you know what I mean? Like, but you won't see me build a career off that. And I think he's right. And it's the reason why sometimes I'll say no to projects. Someone comes to me with a decent budget and they'll go, we want to make this thing. And I'm like, I'm not interested in what you're doing. And I feel like if I'm not interested in what you're doing, I can't do it well. And if I can't do it well, then I'm not representing myself as best as I can.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for that. I'll definitely pass that
Thank you.
on.
And I'll add one more thing. Anybody, and most people will tell you, and I see that I have to say hello to Emily and Sean, who work with us in Best Girl. They're on the call, and they basically produced the Tuesday with Tom show. But I'll help anybody, man. All you got to do is call me. And I was on the phone this week with a young man, a young white kid from Auburn, called me up because he wanted to be a dentist, but his parents wanted to be a dentist, but he wants to be an actor. So he wanted me because I've been doing two things. And so we had a great conversation. So anybody out there, you're welcome to get my information from John, and we'll have a conversation.
Sure. I'm sure he would be honored to have that conversation with you. Thank you. And Ron, just before, I know I don't want to take any more time, but I do have a podcast that's called Real Moments, REEL Moments, with badass women in film and entertainment. So any of those women you want to pass on for the podcast, let me know.
I would love to introduce you to some of the baddest.
Okay, awesome. I'll let somebody else talk.
Thanks, Yvonne.
Okay, thank you.
So, Tom, I got a question from the chat. What were the challenges in transitioning from being an athlete to the film industry, and how did you navigate your way through that?
I think because it wasn't intentional. When I started doing theater, and I started doing theater in 99 seat houses, and where the people are right on top of you. And I got this feeling inside, this thing inside that happens when you play football. I got that same thing from theater. And, you know, people say you practice the way you play. No, you don't. There ain't 65, 70, 80,000 people in the stands when you're practicing. You're just trying to get through the practice, man.
Right.
But you put 80,000 people up there, and it's a whole different thing that happens to your body. And that happened to my body when I started doing theater. There was just this rush that it was like, wow, I hadn't felt this since I played my last game. It wasn't hard. When I stopped playing football, I was ready to stop. And I didn't want to necessarily try to continue playing. And so it wasn't very difficult for me at all. I was ready to move to the next thing in my life. And quite frankly, I thought when I left Los Angeles, I would pretty much stop acting. And I tried to, but you know, it's really interesting. I mean, you get older, and man, I've had 3 auditions this week, and so it's just, I don't know. It's crazy how it works. So doesn't necessarily mean I'll have 3 jobs, but
right.
You know, it's cool that I have good agents, and we've been together a long time. Like I said, the lady was the receptionist, and she's put together a good staff. And so I made the transition, I think, fairly easy. And I've always just said, we'll see where it goes.
Excellent. Darren, I know you've been waiting patiently, so I'm going to add you and we're going to unmute and go ahead and ask your question.
Awesome. So I'm from Miami, Florida. I was in the International Baccalaureate program in high school and middle school. Got into FSU. I'm about to graduate now, and I'm going to go back down to Miami. And recently, I've been looking for internships, and I gained a couple, all of which were unpaid and asked me to work 40 to 60 hours. I don't, high income family. Like right now I work 2 jobs. I guess this is a question on how do you think from a student's perspective, should I go about balancing, reaching for the goals that I want to achieve, and then also dealing with, my own personal struggles. How do you think someone who wants to, get into the film industry and be successful in the film industry, how do you think they should go about, I guess, jumping these hurdles?
Is that me?
Ronald, why don't you take that one, since it's a Miami-based one, and then Tom, you can add in.
Sure, maiden date, my friend. Bruh, honestly, the answer to almost every question you're ever gonna have about your career, from my point of view, is make something. So, like, if you find yourself in a space where you're not sure how to get started, make something. Go make something. If you have a space where you're not sure how to meet people, go make something. If you're not sure how to find a job, go make something. I personally strongly disagree with the concept that you should be working 40 hours for free on something called an unpaid internship. To me, that's like against the 14th Amendment, frankly. Like, I'm like, that's ridiculous. Like, I don't understand that concept. But I think that you have to ask yourself, are you building something with people? Are you being inclusive of your community in the process? Or are you thinking about you? A lot of people come to me, or not to me, but like to my collective, and they'll be like, yo, I got this movie I want to make, without ever having jumped on any one of our sets. They don't know who we are. They just bring this concept. And they're like, I want to direct this film. And the reason why we often don't engage isn't because we're against them working with us. It's because they're not part of what we're trying to build. We're trying to build something that's much larger than us. It's about a community. And so be part of that community. Get to know who the players in your community are. Get to know who's doing what in your community. Jump on those sets. 90% of the time is my honest advice to students. If you have a question, 90% of the time, the answer is make something. If you want to build your career, make something. Meet people, make something. You want to go win an award or take your stuff to festival, make something. You literally start at nothing, but go make something. And I think you'll have something at the end of it.
Tom, you want to add something?
No, I agree with Ronald. You got to, if you produce something, the thing, one of the things I learned is, as an actor, you don't own anything. If you make a film, you own it. You can do what you want to do with it. And then the other thing I would say, as far as, when I first got to California, I remember they told me about Harrison Ford. Harrison Ford was a carpenter. And so he'd go do an acting job, and then he'd go and build decks on people's houses. And I said, oh man, that's cool. So you can do work that pays you. It doesn't necessarily have to be film and television work. I've sold ice cream. I worked on a garbage truck. I've done all kinds of work, man. But if you need the money, you do something that pays you the money, but you may have to do something different that gets you the experience and the community that Ronald is talking about. So I agree with him. 40 hours a week, unpaid internship. No, man. I don't think that's a good way to go about it. I think they're taking advantage of you. They're taking advantage.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. All right, Sandy, did we lose Sandy?
I'm here.
You pulled down your hand though. So I know. Yeah, okay. I can hear you. Go ahead and ask your question.
I wanted to weigh in on Darren and what he was saying and what everybody was saying. So, please. And you're from Miami, right? So we we frown upon anything that's non-paid, but we do on our website, we actually have under our jobs page is a section for internships, and people can post only paid internships on our website, which is filmmiami.org. And the other thing is that when, and that's only one M in Film Miami, by the way. The other thing is for our local incentive, we require that a student from a local university be hired or graduated within a year. But you're at FSU, correct? Are you at FSU? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So that poses a little bit of a problem, for that. But that said, we also have, I say all the film commissions, most of us have directories. You can, also you can put yourself in maybe as a beginning PA if that's what you want to do. But I agreed with everything what Ron and Thomas said, and I put it in the chat before also, go to as many events as you can and network and meet people, shake their hand, say, hi, I'm Darren. And, I'm trying to get in the film business, and you will break in, that way if you want to, and I sometimes, and I say this about students, sometimes they're afraid, they don't know if they want to make something yet, or they don't know which direction they want to go to. Getting onto a set and being a PA is a really good way for them to learn all the different aspects of production and see what's going on to figure out what they might want to do. So I say meet people in your community or wherever you are.
Agreed.
Great point, Sandy. I actually always tell people that, my life is a result of being at the right place at the right time and then not screwing it up. But you have to be at the right place, and that means you have to get out and do different things. So I just want, we're wrapping up here, but I want to give Thom, I want to give you an opportunity to plug or talk about anything you want people to be aware of that you have coming up to look for.
Yeah, Tuesdays with Thom, at 9 o'clock Eastern, 8 o'clock Central. We have fantastic guests. It's a fun hour. It's a talk show. Check us out. It's on Facebook and it repeats on YouTube. Best Gurl is the name of our business. Best Gurl YouTube channel.
And that's Ronald, how about you? Do you have anything you want to talk about?
Check my book.
There's the book.
It's called Walk On. We've sold a ton of.
Cool.
And, you produce a product, it'll pay you back.
I got to cop me a copy of that, Thom.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Ronald, what do you have to push?
Well, we have a film premiering. I'm actually, as soon as I hang up with you, I have to head to Orlando for the Florida Film Festival. I have a film premiering there this weekend. So that should be fun. It's a film it's a documentary I made during COVID. Just conversation with my mother. It's called Searching for Anna Belford, and you can check that out online at the Florida Film Festival. It should be premiering also in Miami at the Third Horizon Film Festival. So, and then the other thing was, if you want to check out our collective, we have a bunch of brilliant artists that we work with. It's an incredibly diverse group of people who all come from incredible backgrounds, all young, minority-driven content. You could find out more at WEG Films, the White Elephant Group. So wegfilms.com, or you can find us on Instagram or Twitter, I think. Yeah, Instagram and Twitter at WEG Films. So check us out.
Excellent. And so just a reminder to everybody that our next Film Florida Friday will be part 2 of this discussion on diversity in our industry with M. Denise Simmons and Marco Mall. That's Friday, May 7th at 9:30 Eastern time. We'll be sending out email blasts and posting on social media, but I posted the registration link in the chat box already. A few people have already taken advantage of that. So we're really, really happy to see that. I want to sincerely thank all of our Film Florida members for allowing us to do this. We're a volunteer-driven organization that's funded entirely by our members. So without that ongoing support, we don't exist. So if you're not a member of Film Florida, we hope you'll consider joining the organization at filmflorida.org. Student memberships are just $25. Individuals are just $75, and corporate memberships start at $500. Keep up with everything we're doing on social media on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And of course, please check out the Film Florida podcast, which is available on Apple, Google, Stitcher, and the iHeartRadio app. Thanks again for everybody for being here. And Thom and Ronald, thanks so much for being our first guests on Film Florida Friday. And we appreciate everything you had to offer today. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.